Welcome to SMN, the podcast for anyone who knows the roller coaster of living in a new country. Whether you're crying alone in your bedroom with no friends, don't worry, we've all been there, or can't get over the fact that this is the awesome life you live. This is your place to laugh, learn, and feel a little less alone on this wild ride. I'm your host, Kat, just a regular American living in Ecuador, figuring it all out one very baby step at a time. From epic language fails to humbling life lessons, I'm here to share my journey and help you navigate yours. On this show, we'll laugh, cry, and maybe even cringe a little as we dig into the real, messy, hilarious truth about life abroad. Ready for a good laugh? Great. Vámonos, baby.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to SMN. I'm super excited to get into episode number 3 today because I get this question so much, is why do I advocate so much for Ecuador? And yeah, let's get into it, baby. So I want to start out by saying Ecuador, in my opinion, is one of the most underrated countries in the world. And we're going to get into it, but I kind of want to talk a little bit about my history with Ecuador. So first off, if you've listened to the other episodes, you know that my life in Ecuador has not always been rainbows and butterflies and sunshine. I have definitely had my moments where I have been mad at Ecuador or not happy here, or I would ruminate. And I was in this workplace where, you know, we were all foreigners and we would sit and have coffee and talk about the things that had happened. And maybe someone didn't let me off the Ecovia that day and it just pissed me off, and we would ruminate. And so the way I looked at Ecuador when I first, kind of like year 2, I guess, because my first year I was like, wow. And then that wore off. It wasn't positive. And I just want to talk about how that switch happened and how I now just notice the beauty of this place. Because y'all, I've lived in several countries now, and I remember being in Santiago, Chile, and I remember looking at the mountains there and like, nothing wrong with those mountains. They are beautiful. But I was like, shit, Quito has some lush mountains. Like, look at them. Like, I'm looking at them right now, y'all. Like, I'm looking at my window and there is green all over that mountain. And it's just wild because they're massive and beautiful. And then I just recently got back from Manta and we flew. And on the flight from Quito to Manta, which if you don't know, Manta is the coast of Ecuador and I'm in the mountains. Yo, we were flying to Manta and there were like 5 volcanoes just like peeking out. And I was like, this is wild. This is unreal. But anyways, I just think Ecuador is beautiful, not to mention it's one of the most, if not most, biodiverse countries for its size. And in size aside as well, it's extremely biodiverse. And this was not how I thought of Ecuador because I was focused on the negative when I was in a really bad place here. And now I've switched to train my brain for the positive. And there's just so much good in this country. And so I want to get into it. My husband works in tourism. That's how we met. You've maybe heard one of the episodes, but yeah, we met at this secret garden when I was volunteering, when I was backpacking Ecuador. Fast forward, my husband still works there. I live here. We live together because he's my husband. So I've seen him go through the ups and the downs of working with tourism in Ecuador. Because y'all, you got a lot of shit you got to deal with when you live in Ecuador. There is like the highs of like, oh my God, there's so many people here. This is amazing, to the, oh, we're having a paro. We're having a protest and it shuts down the country for 13 days and ain't nobody coming. And then we had COVID, and then there's like the occasional assassination you hear of, which it's no different than the CEO of that healthcare company in the US or the insurance company getting shot. These are targeted attacks, but people don't see that. They just see the international news and they're like, oh my God, there was an assassination. I'm never going to Ecuador. Goodbye. And I'm not out here telling y'all Ecuador is the safest country in the world, because it ain't. But I also think you'd be fine if you come here as a tourist, especially because they protect the tourist areas really well. Also, y'all, I'm living here. I'm on the ground here. And obviously you got to be smart. You got to like, don't be walking around with your phone out like super obvious, or don't bring like a $20,000 camera and bring it in the middle of Guayaquil. Like, probably not the smartest idea. You might be asking for a little bit. But if you're just smart, you're aware, you're pilas, as they say here, like you're aware of your surroundings, like you'll be good. And so anyways, I've seen the highs and lows of tourism because the second it gets this bad international press, tourism drops. And so I want to tell a little story about last year. January 9th was a wild day in the world of tourism. So we had this is not funny. I don't know why I was laughing. This is not funny at all. We had just had an assassination. Once again, not funny. The year before, like a few months before. And so that kind of like lowered tourism. So the hostel was kind of hanging out about like 85% full, consistently. And then fast forward to January, this made mega international news where these people kind of like hijacked a news station. And I don't know, it was a little weird. Everybody got out unharmed and nothing really came about it. But that day, it felt like World War III was breaking out. And I remember being specifically in my apartment at the time. We lived in a different place. I could just hear cars honking their horns and so much traffic. And I had somebody who was helping me with furniture in my house. And they were like, well, I guess I gotta go. I don't know. And everybody was in panic mode. So they saw on the news that these people had hijacked a news station. They had like grenades and guns and I don't even know. And this was in a different city. This was not in Quito. But because of that, so much misinformation was like spread. Like y'all, if y'all get a WhatsApp message and it says forwarded many times, don't trust that. So many people take one thing and they run. They sprint faster than like Usain Bolt to send it. And you're like, no. So anyways, there was this picture of these people in the metro. If y'all didn't know, Quito got a metro. It took forever to build, but it is here, y'all. Shout out to the metro in Quito. This is not sponsored, by the way. So anyways, there was this picture of everybody just like hitting the deck, like lying on the ground, face down, hands on their heads in the metro. And it was circulating on WhatsApp. And I remember even a friend of mine sent it to me. And I believed it too, because I was like, well, damn, I use the metro occasionally. That could have been me. I didn't forward it, but yeah. And I was just like, whoa, what is happening? Oh, goodness. Did you see that picture? Come to find out, y'all, it was from an earthquake drill when they were still making the metro. So like it wasn't what it was, and everybody was just sharing this misinformation and so much fear, so much panic. And so I remember, the country kind of shut down that day. Everybody went home. Nobody was working. Everybody was just in panic, like fear mode. But in reality, in Quito that day, nothing really happened. But because it had made international news, everybody was freaking out. I remember getting messages from my friend in Australia, people in Europe, my parents, and so many people like, yeah, like, do you and Diego need to leave? And I was like, honestly, no. I don't really see the big deal. Also, when you live here, you kind of get used to just random shit like this happening. And so I was kind of like, yeah, no, I feel pretty good. I've had other situations that have pushed me to want to move more than that has. And that didn't even come across my radar. I was just like, yeah, it was wild. But I remember the next day being like, I want to show people. And I did not have my following then yet. But I remember being like, I want to show people what it's really like out right now. And so I took my phone with me. And I went to go drive because I went to go meet my friend at Cafecito, which if you haven't been to this coffee shop, it's so cute. And they have this dog that's named Mocha. She's the sweetest thing in the world. So if you're in Quito, head on over to Cafecito. A little plug for my best friend here's boyfriend. He owns it and they're amazing. They're really big coffee people. And Mocha, she is so sweet. Go take a picture with Mocha and send it to me. Oh my God, I love her. Anyways, I went over there and I recorded myself going. And I was like, these are the streets. I'm driving through them. Here's this coffee shop. And then I was walking my dogs later and I was just showing people like, this is what life looks like right now, y'all. This is normal. And granted, there were less people on the streets, rightfully so, because I think there was just this like sense of fear and panic and people were still a little nervous to get out of their house. But I was out and I was just trying to show people. And that video actually did pretty well, especially at the time for me. And yeah, that was like step number one, because what I saw in my husband's business or like what he works in. So what I saw with tourism with my husband is like I was saying, they were averaging around like 85% after the assassination. And before that, they were like in the 90s, 100, or not 100s. They were like 92, 100, like floating around there. And they were at like 85% full. And bam, January 9th happens. The news thing happens. Yo, that average went down to 20 to 30%. They had to think about letting people off because it did not pick back up. It was probably 6 months of steady 30%. And it was just so frustrating and hard because I just remember being like, no, guys, like, this is not happening. Like, you come here and you feel fine. Like, this was just one little thing that blew up. And now people have taken it and run with it. And now they're terrified, even more so terrified of Ecuador. And so it's just really sad to see that on like the tourism perspective side of it. And then even just moving forward, like, obviously I'm from the United States and I know how people see Latin America. I remember telling people when I was 22 years old that I was going to backpack around Latin America by myself. And everybody was like, no, like, that's super dangerous. Like, all these things. So I have what people think Latin America is from growing up in that. And then I have the other side of, hey, yo, I've been living in this for 8 years because I was here a year before I moved to Ecuador. And my mission has become to show people that people live in other countries. Like, there are bougie places in other countries. And I think it's just people don't realize that. Like, I'll go to this coffee shop and it's impeccable. Like, it's beautiful. It's like, I don't know if impeccable is a word. Impecable. Like, it's like you could eat off the floors and it's super aesthetic, Instagrammy, whatever. And I'm just like, people don't realize that this exists in Ecuador, that there's so many really nice parts here. And I remember even my friends visiting from the US and they're like, wow, like, we were really impressed with the roads and we were really impressed with like these coffee shops and these restaurants. And we took them to some really great places, like on all different levels of the spectrum of like fancy to market, and it became this like mission in me to show people the real Ecuador, because what you watch on the news is not what Ecuador is on a day-to-day basis. Do not get me wrong. Things happen in Ecuador, but it's just such a lovely, beautiful country that if you just gave it a chance. And so I don't know, it became my mission to show this to the world. And I even remember too, my husband and I went to Costa Rica, and I don't think Costa Rica probably compares themselves with Ecuador because no need. Like, honestly, so many people come, but I had a lot of people tell me like, oh, like, I'm not really that interested in Costa Rica because I've heard it's very similar to Ecuador. And so anyways, my husband and I were going to Costa Rica and I wasn't super excited. I'm going to be completely honest because everybody's like, it's very similar. And I don't believe in comparing countries because I don't want to ever put somebody down to make me feel better or to like make Ecuador better. But going to Costa Rica just opened my eyes. And I remember like literally, so first off, my husband had to get a visa to go to Costa Rica. And in his visa process, he had to like show him our entire itinerary. Y'all, the man ChatGPT'd our entire itinerary, booked everything, which don't get me wrong, I appreciate that. But that's what we did. And you know how many hours we drove day after day? It was like we would stay 2 nights and then it would be like a 6-hour drive. 2 nights, another 6-hour drive. And guess who was driving? Moi. Because I don't think Diego had his driver's license at that point. Anyways, I drove all over frickin' Costa Rica. And I'm here to tell you, beautiful country, but it just like hit me. Ecuador's got all of this. Like, what are we doing? Like, what is wrong? Like, why do people not know about us? Because in Costa Rica, it was full. There's direct flights all the time. Like, people are going all the time. Like, what are they doing that we're not? And I just feel like, well, Costa Rica is beautiful. I'm like, Ecuador is beautiful. But I'm like, what are we doing? And it just made me realize like Costa Rica has done such a good job of marketing themselves internationally, whereas Ecuador hasn't. And even my friend and I, we've been talking about doing a wellness retreat, and we were going to do it in Ecuador. And I told her, I was like, Ecuador's a hard sell. It's really hard to get people down to Ecuador. And for me, I have passion behind that. And it makes sense for me to go into that uphill battle. But for her, I'm like, Ivana, her name's Ivana. And I was like, Ivana, like, I just don't know if this makes sense for you to join in on this in Ecuador. Why don't we start somewhere else first? And she, she started asking some of her friends, and she lives in Texas, and she asked some people there and some other people. She's an international girly as well. But anyway, so she was asking a lot of people, and everybody was like, why Ecuador? Like, why not Costa Rica? Why not Guatemala? Why not Mexico? And it's just like, as a person who lives here, I just want to shake people and be like, you have no idea what you're missing out on. in Ecuador. Like I said, one of the most biodiverse countries. It's actually a lot cheaper than these other countries that have promoted themselves more internationally. And I think when I combine the tourism aspect of my husband, my like business type mind of just seeing other countries do it who have either equal or even less than what Ecuador has. And then of course you add in the fact that I live here and I'm going to these places that people don't expect are here in Ecuador. That you combine all three of those things and I'm like, yo, we got to put Ecuador on an international stage. Like this place has so much to offer if the world just knew. And I know people have like different opinions on tourism and over tourism, but I'm going to tell you, Ecuador's not even close to being like anywhere with too much tourism right now. We need it and it helps the economy. And there's just so many things I could say about that. But I just think from a person from the United States perspective, they don't realize how nice Ecuador is. They don't realize that they can go to these restaurants and have the best meal of their lives that might even be nicer than a restaurant in their hometown. I remember even taking my parents to this part of Quito and they were like, wow, this is beautiful. I don't even think you could find this in the US. And that's what I want people to experience. I want people to come down here and be like, whoa, have their like minds blown. Like I had no idea that this was here. And I want them to go back and tell their friends because Ecuador will sell itself, but we just got to get people here. And I just feel so passionate about that because like I said, you know, I see it in the numbers in tourism. And then I see it even too, like when I invite people to come down, they're like, oh, you just want to meet in the middle in Mexico City? And don't get me wrong, I love Mexico City, but it's also crazy to me because Ecuador is so close to Miami. It's a 3.5-hour flight to Miami. Like, y'all, we got to get people here. This is just kind of where my passion for Ecuador came. And when social media coined me the patriotic gringa or whatever, it just, I wanted to make it my mission to really show people what it looks like. Like, yes, you can watch the news and yes, you can, I don't know, find your information in other places, but I want to just promise my viewers to show people the real Ecuador. And once again, there's negative happening, but nobody highlights the positive. And so I want to talk about the positive a little bit more. If you love Ecuador, let me know. Follow me on Instagram because I'm always hyping it up and I'm just showing my life. And I'm not here to hype it up in a fake way either. And I'm not here to tell you it's rainbows and butterflies and sunshine every day, but I'm here to show you like there are some cool places, y'all. So just give it a chance. Thank you guys again for listening. I'm so excited to have you guys here and I can't wait to see you on the next episode.
If you got a good laugh from this episode, make sure to follow the show and share it with a friend who can relate to the highs and lows of life abroad. Don't forget to follow me on Instagram @KatMcGreaves for more stories and tips about life in Ecuador and beyond. See you next time. Ciao, ciao.